Wait for it. Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast about the fun and dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guest, Mr. Tyler T.E. Butcher, introduce himself to our listeners and viewers at home.
Oh, hey, sorry, I had a brain fart for a second. You said my
wait,
name.
that's my name.
Oh, wait, that's me.
Like, oh, that's me. Oh, they need me to talk. Yeah, I'm a 12-year veteran of the Army National Guard. I've been writing since we deployed to Afghanistan in 2019, and that's about where I started the decision to write professionally. And now I'm here.
I mean, as one does in the middle of a firefight, you know, I really need to write that book before I die.
And when you're getting rocketed, you're like, man, you know what? I just need to go write some shit down and get some stuff off my chest first.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I get it. So what do you do in the Army?
I'm a Cav Scout, 19 Delta.
Nick, are we allowed to let him stay? I mean, I think they might take our blue cord away if we do.
I mean, I'll talk to the council, but I think it'll be all right.
All right. Well, I mean, you know, the mafia will cover. We'll be okay. Well, our guests, one of our listeners invited him. He's like, "Hey, you really should talk to this guy." And we're dancing monkeys for the people.
Hey, I'm not too proud to. I walk places too, occasionally.
Do you ever tell anybody you're basically infantry?
No.
Okay. Woo.
My job is entirely different.
Do you ride around in the Bradley?
No, I ride around in Humvees and helicopters.
Okay.
All right. That's acceptable.
MRAPs.
So we'll allow
it. So how many times you get to go to the sandbox?
I came in right at the end of Afghanistan. We deployed in 2019. My other deployment was to Kosovo. And between the two, I think I'd rather be back in Afghanistan.
I've heard stories about Kosovo.
Great place. I was there for a while. Yeah.
It was mainly just because
go to Hilton. We'll be okay. We'll go visit tourists and stuff.
Leadership got like so bored that they were like, "Hey, let's put all our attention in this American company that we got setting up north. We got nothing better to do." Whereas in Afghanistan, yeah, they had plenty of better things to do than bother us with their like little unimportant like games. Is I guess the best word for it.
I remember doing the dumbest PowerPoints because I was a junior officer when I got there, and the BC was like, "Okay, I want all these new lieutenants to do a presentation once a week," and I just I ripped on them. It was like 30 slides of me drawing shit while I was there. And here, because there's nothing to do, because this isn't a combat mission, it's a waste of our time and resources. I drew this, and then I drew this comic book, and then I drew that comic book, and then I started going to the gym, and then I got into the basketball league, and here's slides on that. I got reamed. But they did it with a smile because they thought it was funny. They're like, "Nick, we know it's stupid." I'm like, "Well, then why'd you make us do it?" Well, you know,
I got that reaction when I was the Sharp NCO and I gave my presentation because I thought it was BS. You know, tell people to do the right thing. We already know all this, and like we kind of got to go do laundry before we go back on patrol. So instead of giving the 25 PowerPoint presentation that I was supposed to, I said, "Just remember, boys and girls, no means no, yes means maybe, and even if you have it in writing, you're still screwed. All right, are we good? Let's go." Apparently, leaving in under 5 minutes made them suspicious.
Yeah,
I would no longer the Sharp NCO.
Yeah,
that's the occasion I have to give a presentation. I'm the TOW system SME for the troop. So every time I go up, it's like, "All right, guys, here's how to blow things up safely. If the truck drives in front of you, don't fire your missile. Don't blow up your friend."
I mean, safety's on their consideration eventually. It's maybe a low third, fourth sometimes, depending on the CO.
Well, sometimes I feel like the presentation is more for the LTs because we were at a JRTC rotation. My LT was like, "White 3, pursue it, engage that BMP with your TOW system." And I was like, "I'm not pursuing him. I have to stop to shoot this thing. They'll just kill me."
Sir, you know it's wire guided, right? Like, it's not a fire and forget. It's not a javelin.
Yeah, we had some of those stupid lieutenants. One of them demanded we salute him when we stopped outside of Biop on Route Irish because he was an officer, by God. And I'm like, oh, sniper check. And then everyone signed up, but fate was not smiling on us that day because there were no snipers around. But yeah, I've run the game. I've met some really good officers too, you know, like some that you'd have followed to hell just because they wanted to try the water there. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, but even the bad ones seem to know their job. Mostly, they were just stupid.
Well, like, he wasn't like a bad LT. He just didn't understand that, like, I can't, like, this is a defensive weapon. This isn't, I go chase a BMD and blow it up. This is, I wait for them to get where I can see them and I engage them, and then I run.
So Nick actually was on this mission where this happened because I found out after the fact that his was the unit providing Overwatch. We actually there was a route in Iraq that you had to go over a pontoon bridge over the was it Euphrates or the Tigris? I can't remember.
Tigris.
It was the Tigris. So we're having to go over a pontoon bridge, which is a floating bridge, dear listeners. And so that means you got to stop. Each of the tanks that we were escorting for the head convoy had to dismount, and then the truck goes, then the tank goes. One of the tanks hadn't been dismounted yet, and we started taking fire. So this overzealous tanker climbs in because they stay with the equipment, so you don't have to like send it up and down the chain of command for custody's sake. They just send one of their people for every tank. He gets this bright idea. He climbs into this tank, still mounted on a het, and fires it at the enemy. He did take out the enemy, but also his own tank because it rocked. And then next thing you know, he's turtled it.
Yep.
I was telling Nick that story. He's like, no way you were there for that too. Because our paths crossed a few times.
Yeah, and then it ended up becoming like a slide deck of what not to do. It was titled "Don't Be That Guy."
I mean, in his defense, he did blow what he was like. He shot what he was aiming at. He can't get mad at the Cav guy for using his tank right. I think they put him in for a bronze star, and it got downgraded because they lost a tank. Yeah, I mean, he could have just run to one of the tanks that was already dismounted. Like, that would have been the play that would have gotten him to the Bravos from everybody. Yeah, bullets start flying. You know, you made a judgment call. It just happened to be wrong. But well, it happened to be. It was his tank. It was like one of those. There are many other tanks, but this one is mine. Oh yeah.
As I say, a bad decision is better than no decision.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a decision kills every time.
Absolutely. And, you know, if he was going to rock the boat, so to speak, I'm glad he did it on land and not on the pontoon bridge.
On the bridge.
I am not going in that nasty poop water to save him. I'm sorry. I don't like him that much.
No.
Although we did have, we called him Kentuck because, you know, he's from Kentucky. We're creative like that. Who, for $5, we dared him. He drank out of the Tigris. I am not convinced that man is alive anymore.
No.
But he did for $5. And take out of an MRE.
He's probably not only is he alive, but
got like superpowers.
Didn't even affect him. Probably got superpowers. COVID didn't affect him. Like he had like a sneeze, and that was his COVID bout right there.
Probably.
You know, kind of like when Major Payne eats the cupcake with all the laxatives in it. He just rips ass, and then he's like good to go after that.
Oh, that's
probably what happened.
What we have here is a failure to communicate. He quoted Cool Hand Luke with precision.
Oh yeah,
and his knife hand was on point.
It was a good knife hand.
Have you seen that movie, Butcher?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've seen Major Payne and I've seen Cool Hand Luke, both thanks to my dad.
Okay, excellent parenting right there.
Yeah, it is top marks.
All right, so because this is the Blasters and Blades podcast, before we get any further, we do have to do the religion question. So, are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
All right, Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Gundam.
Okay, go on.
To be expected. I mean, I'm a giant robot guy. So actually, my whole like trek into sci-fi started with my dad, and I was like I forget if was I a toddler, 5 years old? I forget. But he was like, oh, hey, sit down and watch this movie on TV with me. And it was Starship Troopers. And I was like, this is cool. These guys are shooting these monstrous bugs. And I played that on the playground with my friends. It's about that time when, what was it? It's either Gundam Wing or 8th MS Team. I forget which I watched first. But one of them was airing on Toonami at around that time. I want to say it was like 1999, maybe 2000. I forget the exact year.
Y2K, I remember.
Yeah, you guys probably remember that year much more clearly than I do.
Oh yeah. Well, New Year's Eve, Seattle at the Space Needle. I remember most of it. I just remember nothing blew up.
I was in high school that year.
Yeah, no, that was the next year. I remember 2001 much better than 2000.
Okay. All right. So you love the big stompy robots. That's
One of my first games on when we got an Xbox in 2003 when we moved to was it East Atlanta, was Mech Assault, which got me into BattleTech.
Okay. That was a good one.
BattleTech's a good one too. Yeah, I remember that game. Like I always liked the lore for the BattleTech. Like old games, it wasn't just, point and shoot and watch the explosions. Like there actually was like underlying stories that made it cooler. I think they've got
understanding what the word of Blake Jihad was completely changes the context of that game. I was like, oh, we're just shooting these guys. Maybe they're fanatics. We don't know. And now it's like, oh, I understand why they didn't know who they were fighting.
Yeah. So, okay. So, if we're going to move on to the other side of the equation, because we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, Game of Thrones, The Wheel of Time, or Chronicles of Narnia.
Ooh, I hate to go with the fourth option again here, but Dragonlance.
Okay, acceptable.
So yeah, my three big writing influences, the people I read the most, like as a young kid and teenager, are Margaret Weis, Plainly Pardoe, and Harry Turtledove. I don't read as much Harry Turtledove anymore because I think in 2016 he called me a Nazi for saying something vaguely pro-life, and I got banned off old Twitter. So not as big a fan as Harry Turtledove as I used to be.
Yeah, but his Guns of the South.
Oh, and I also read I forget her name, but Dragon Riders of Pern.
And McCaffrey.
A lot younger.
And McCaffrey was a solid.
1 second, JR, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Feel like this is Sprint, or is it?
Hear you now.
Okay, perfect. Because I wasn't going to remember what phone company had that commercial. But yeah, Dragon Rise of Pern was Anne McCaffrey, and that's classic. That's solid. I did dig Harry Turtledove's books, but you are right. Sometimes you just don't need to know what they think politically because it just ruins the mojo for you. All right. Sorry about that technical issue right there. The international mafia of former infantrymen, the council voted, and they were going to boot him out. And so they just froze his connection. But Nick, he called in some favors. He knew a guy who knew a guy. And so, with the Ranger tab of greatness, we're able to get Butcher back on. So, Tyler, welcome back. We're sorry about the confusion. Nothing personal. Sometimes those blue cord people can be divas.
They do. They are.
You have a cool museum, though.
We do. Iron Mike is the shiznit.
It's a pretty good museum. I love that thing.
Yeah. All right. So you were talking about your love of Dragon Riders of Pern and Anne McCaffrey and how you grew up reading Harry Turtledove, but he called you a Nazi on Twitter or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
And shortly after that happened, I got kicked off old Twitter. This Twitter account I have now isn't my old one. It's a newer one that's more associated with my author brand, I guess, than just my personal Twitter, even though I still kind of use it like that.
It happens. Yeah, I like Turtledove, but I realized with a lot of the people I grew up reading, if I wanted to keep liking their books, and I did, then I needed to not look at what they said online. It's just my rule of thumb.
With Bladed Margaret Weis, it's just 2 out of 3 isn't bad because they're really cool.
Pardoe's a good dude. We've interviewed him. He's very pro-military. His son's in, I believe, as well. His son's in the service, but he's gone to tank ride-alongs and all kinds of stuff to get his research right. He writes for Wargate Press now, and now I think Athon as well. He's a good dude.
Yeah, I love his the land and sea stuff he's been doing.
Yeah. I really dig his work too. I'm a huge fan of the BattleTech, and to be honest, until the controversy where they fired him, like I didn't even know the dude's politics, because if you don't make it a thing, it's not a thing. That's how I always took it. But the concept that Harry Turtledove came up with, where the Guns of the South, they had an AK-47 against a 1861 Springfield.
No, that book is just hilarious.
Where you go from like 3 to 4 rounds a minute if you're good. The really good troops might get 6 to what an AK can put out. And I'm like, yeah, that's a definite force multiplier. And it got me thinking, one of these days, if I ever have the time to do that level of research, I'd like to send an American infantryman with a Browning with Modus and see if he could just jack the Brits up when they land at Trenton. I'm just one Modus in a box of ammo. You end the invasion in one night. There goes the war. Revolution over.
Oh yeah.
The Modus will reach out and touch someone. I bet it could sink the ships too.
Oh yeah. Modus could take out some like wooden like sail ships.
Well, the trick is you'd have to hit them at the water line so it takes on water, or hit the powder store, or send tracer around so you light the wood on fire, because the wooden ships are already somewhat porous. So you have to, overcompensate to sink it.
I would send I wouldn't have the Modus at Trenton. I would have it with the guys that had their expedition into Canada.
Yeah. With General Knox.
Yeah, so that there is no Canada. It's all just America, and we don't have annoying neighbors to the north that think they're better than us for no reason.
Okay, but that was before Benedict Arnold went bad. So do we give him a pass if he doesn't betray us yet? He's still married a loyalist.
Yeah, you did, but maybe if we win and he's a big hero, he doesn't betray us.
Okay, but if we don't have that, we lose the most iconic line to come out of the revolution. I only regret that I have but one life to give for my country.
Baller.
Yeah, because that happened when he betrayed West Point. That was when they caught the guy trying to sneak the information out to alert the Americans of what was going on. So I don't know. It's a tough call. He's a scumbag. He'll probably betray us anyway because it was his ego. He didn't like being second fiddle to Georgie. Washington was a little hard on his soul, I guess.
That's fair.
Although
not everyone can be a great man of history.
That's true. And he this is not the time to go into the infantry jokes about George Washington, dollar bills, and single mothers. So instead, if you could take a weapon system back to end the war sooner, what would you take? Are you going to take your rockets?
Tow system seems kind of overkill for it, not really applicable because it's not really an anti-infantry platform. It's an anti-armor platform.
But if you sink their boats with their troops on it, I mean,
that's fair. And I guess if you have it direct fire and you're not thinking like fly over, shoot down, yeah, you could just dome a bunch of their ships because you sink like 12 ships. Like that's half the fleet that they sent. So I guess we're boned. We got to go back to Britain.
Or you could get the AT-4s. They're portable, and then you could make one heck of a hookah with the cast off.
Or just bury it for when the British are marching by.
Yeah, or the historians that find it later. Like, when did they have AT-4s in 1774? What's going on?
Like, all right, guys, we're going to strap a clock and some duct tape to this tube, and the British won't know what hit them.
Pretty much.
All right, Nick, what are you taking back if you're gonna stop the British?
Oh man, I've had dreams about this ever since I saw Time Cop.
Yeah, that's a good one. Jean-Claude Van Damme, right?
Yeah, the opening scene, there's a whole bunch of Confederate gold going south, and a guy with a couple of M4s, dual wielding, just lays them all out. Javelin requires a heat source, so that's no good. Any weapon system, Bradley fighting vehicle, 25 millimeter.
Until you run out of gas, you're good.
Yeah.
Although
I'll need it for a little bit.
Or you could take a play off the French with their Siegfried line. Was it the Siegfried line in France? Am I remembering that correctly?
The Maginot Line.
Maginot Line. There we go. Where they took their old World War I tanks and they buried them from the turret down, and then it's now just a weapons platform because the cannons still worked. Of course, that only works if they don't go around you and flank you. But whatever. Beggars can't be choosers.
Yeah, you're good until the battery dies.
Yeah. You could definitely see that's the trick with that one is just stop them from landing. Or you take some of that time cop Confederate gold and you go bribe the Hessians so they turn on the Brits and they side with you sooner.
Yeah, there you go.
Although
and that's why we don't have time travel because we would totally abuse it.
But then, oh man, if we take away George Washington's Delaware crossing, like the iconic picture of him standing with his knee up, all Captain Morgan style, we'd lose that.
To go murder redcoats on Christmas,
right?
Fun fact about that: James Monroe and I think one other president are also supposed to be depicted in that painting because they crossed the Delaware with George Washington.
I did not know that. I knew they crossed it. I didn't know they were supposed to be in the painting.
Yeah, James Monroe, he was like a teenager or something when they did that, I think.
That's what gets me is these people that talk about the American history. Like a bunch of old white dudes. And I'm like, you do realize like the average age of those Congress people were like 18, 19. John Adams was the old dude because he was 40.
Yeah, George Washington was like the second oldest. He was like in his 30s or something.
Yeah, but he was already had combat experience because he fought in the French and Indian War or the 7 Years' War, depending on your persuasion. He kind of started it accidentally, but we did get Fort Defiance, so it's a heck of a name for a base.
Yeah, I think Fort
right enemy territory too. It's like an FU twice.
Yeah.
Although that did kind of show the writing on the. See, we're getting nerdy about military stuff where we're not even talking sci-fi, but it did show the writing on the wall because they wouldn't recognize his commission because he was colonial and not regular British Army. So. Ooh. Anyway, all right. What would you take, dear listener? Put in the comment section what weapon system you're taking back to end the war before. And you Brits, I guess we'll let you vote too, but we don't care what you think. But if you want to tell us what you'd send your people with instead, we'll listen.
If you wanted us to care what you thought, well, you would have done better back in the 1770s.
Exactly. But yeah, we'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Get nerdy with us. We really ought to do another like military time travel themed panel and just go ham on like what we would do at different battles just because why not?
I've done like so many like I have so many ideas for like what if like alt hits type stuff that like I would love to do some shit like that because man, I have some opinions on some things.
Could you imagine just one Bradley at the Thermopylae Pass?
Oh, dude,
it's
you only need one.
You only need one round. Talk about one Bradley. You only need one round from the Bradley. It's over. The Immortals are going to be like red mist.
Yeah,
one of those Bushmasters off the chain, man. It's like I was walking with my buddy, and then there was a fine pink mist. I don't know what happened. And like the whole rank and file behind him just gone.
You in the back, 10 rows back. I mean, they were stacked up like
helmet.
Yeah.
They were all fighting like in phalanx formation.
Yeah, that'd been, and they had wicker shields too. That was part of what their one of the things against them is the Persians. Okay, all right. So you went off script for both the fantasy and the sci-fi. It's par for the course, I guess, for you, Butcher. All right, so one of the crying shames of adulthood is we stop asking each other the important question. So we're going to ask you, sir, what is your favorite dinosaur and why?
Oh, this is probably my most like on-script answer you're gonna get. It's T-Rex because Jurassic Park was one of those movies I just loved as a kid. I thought the T-Rex was awesome. It was big and it was cool.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good enough reason. Rule of cool gets you everywhere.
Oh yeah. Got me promoted.
Whatever works. I mean, we don't judge. All right. And then because this is a Blasters and Blades podcast and we shamelessly shill for the man, we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. We are no longer knuckle dragging troglodytes. So, Tyler, coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
Tea, the way my grandma made it.
Sweet ice.
So she makes like sweet tea, but she'll put like the black tea, like the tea that you like boil like in it, and it's like I don't say it's spicy, but it's like better than just like regular sweet tea.
How much sugar? Does it hold the spoon up for you?
Yeah, it's pretty sweet.
You did mention you lived briefly in the ATL in Atlanta, so I just had to check.
Yeah, I think they burn you at the stake if you don't.
Absolutely. The Brits tried to tell me tea was meant to be drank hot, but I just think they're wrong.
No, they're wrong. That's why my grandmother poured their tea in a bucket of sugar and
that's right.
Served it cold.
Diabetes in a cup. That's the way to go.
It was hot for a little bit, and then we put ice in it.
All right. So before we start talking about the Kickstarter that brought us here, and we're kind of excited to do this, Nick's all about them comic books and picture books. But since you did mention that you served in the military, do you feel like your time in uniform affects the way you tell stories?
Yes and no. Like, well, yeah, it's just yes, because there's some like for a lot of the novels, and I'm at sorry, give me a sec. I gotta think how many novels I've written. I wrote one while I was in Kosovo while I wrote the script for this comic, so it tells you where my time went. 20, I want to say 24. I mean 24 or 23. I'd have to pull up the list and actually look at it, but one of those numbers is right. Yeah, there's some aspect, especially in my earlier ones, of like, no shit, there I was, or no shit, there he was, when I'm talking like about other characters in third person. And there are experiences that I've had in the military, conversations that I've had that I feel like there's certain type of soldiers that you just know, and you see kind of like that archetype, or like a character will pop up and you'll be like, oh yeah, I served with that guy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, totally. Yeah. There's a meme about it, like the 9 different archetypes you'll find in a platoon.
And if you don't think you're that guy, if you don't think that guy was with you, you're that guy.
You're that guy.
You were that guy, yeah. If you can't identify who was who or yourself, then you were that guy. Oh, we didn't really have a jokester. It was you.
I mean, I was the guy that partied too hard and drank too much, but, you know, I was a corporal 3 times because I was so good at it. I'm a dinosaur in that respect, because that just couldn't fly anymore. Like after GWAT tamed down, like second chances, psh, you barely get a first chance, bud.
That was the old joke. If you had 3 DUIs, you were going to be a sergeant major one day.
Yeah, but I didn't say behoove you with enough force to make it past, you know, regular E5 sergeant. I didn't get the rocker because I just couldn't emphasize behoove correctly. I failed that test. I was not good enough. I was deemed unworthy. All right. So you mentioned, obviously, like you draw on your military experiences, and obviously, since you mentioned you're still in the Guard, these are your opinions. They do not represent the opinion of the United States Army or any, you know, blah, blah, blah lawyer speak. So with that out of the way, do you draw on people you knew while you were in?
Oh yes, absolutely. There are some people. There is a first sergeant I had who, he retired as a sergeant major, but when I worked with him most, he was our first sergeant, and I've translated this man's name into multiple different languages, so he's been like a cameo character across multiple different books, sometimes the same book, always some kind of master sergeant or first sergeant. And if you served with me, you know exactly who I'm talking about, and if you've read the books, you know exactly who he is.
Nice.
You said he's retired, right? So there's not going to be any repercussions.
Yeah, okay. No, I mean, dude is like the damn Terminator. So I mean, maybe he might come through my wall, and
okay, but if he's retired, does that mean he opened up a used car lot outside of base, and for 31% interest, you too can get this used Dodge Charger?
No, that's beneath him. He has higher goals. I'm telling you, when I tell you this man is the Terminator, he is the Terminator. My buddy went downstairs to go talk about. My roommate in Afghanistan went downstairs to go talk to one of our other buddies about the latest episode of Game of Thrones, knocked on the wrong door. Our first sergeant answered. He was in his underwear. He was sweaty. And my buddy noticed he had nothing in his room except his bed frame, which was pushed vertical against his wall. And the room was dark. And he's just like, oh, I was looking for so-and-so. And first sergeant's like, next door. And so he doesn't go talk to our buddy. He comes back up to my room, tells me this happened. He's like, dude, what the fuck was he doing in there?
Probably PT, sweatbox. But
Yeah,
unlike Judy was charging.
you had second story buildings, and like because we stayed in like the circus tent barracks that we bought from the locals. It wasn't even army circus tents. It was the big, weirdly white and patterned ones that we bought from the locals.
The ones that were coated in kerosene.
Yeah, the Bedouin ones. We bought from the local Bedouins.
If you guys were, if either of you were in Afghanistan in 2009 in like the try to get my directions right, the Eastern Theater, like around Jbad, you probably saw these barracks getting built. They were quote unquote reinforced structures. I'm pretty sure if you lived on the first floor, it was a reinforced structure. It was reinforced because you had a whole other floor they had to go through, where all like the Joes and team leaders were living.
I mean, that's one way to clear leadership issues. Yeah, I didn't deploy to Afghanistan, just Iraq twice, and by 2009 I was already medically retired. But okay, so you draw on people you know. Now, you mentioned you apply your experiences to the way you write stories. Has it affected the way you engage content? Like, do you count bullets when someone's firing? Do you get real antsy if they get the cav tactics wrong?
Sometimes I do. I don't get real antsy because I'm not going to lie. I don't expect most people who like, if your only exposure to the cav is like being kind of around them, I don't expect you to get it right. I don't expect half the people I served with to get it right, because half the time they don't teach you how to be like competent at your job or like know all the ins and outs of your job until you're about to be an E6 going to ALC. Because there's a bunch of stuff that like, oh, I thought this was just the default that we were supposed to know. No, my drill sergeants drilled like a bunch of real advanced shit into us during OSA.
What is it like to buy a company for?
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Like, my experience in basic was 98, so it was a different world. But I will say, and I've made this joke multiple times, and dear listener, you're going to have to listen to me make it again. In 1998, when I enlisted, the CNN ran a series that the world peace might finally be attainable. And my recruiter assured me that I would only be deployed after the Boy Scouts, but before the Ladies Auxiliary. Because, the Guard didn't go anywhere. And then
they go everywhere all the time.
8.5 years on active duty.
Your recruiter did not anticipate the post 9/11 power boost that the National Guard had.
No, not at all. We had the Infinity Stones of deployment, I guess. But I mean, it was cool because I watched units go into theater with M16A1s and come home with like modern weapons. That was finally how they got their new stuff to the Guard units. Because I did my pre-deployment stuff in 03 with an A1. M16A1, smooth grip and everything. It had been in the armory of the unit we joined since, Corporal Jesus made them somewhere. Right? It's
seen M16 from a distance and like the mechanics when I was at basic training, the mechanics at M16s, and we were like, that's weird as hell. We had
you guys had all the M4 carbines? Yeah.
And then when I got to my unit, we had still same old M4 carbines until, say, 2017 when we switched to the A1s.
What is the M16 A1s again?
The M4 A1s, the full automatic ones. We had burst fire M4s before that.
Oh, I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, they started off with late 90s into early 2000s. You had the M4 A1. They're like, oh no, that's not effective. So they switched it to the burst. And then, well, it's good that they're brought back to the A1. Sometimes you want to spray and pray.
Yeah, but that's what you have saws for, or the pig, or the 50 is more precision weapon when handled properly.
Yeah, you put that thing on a crow system.
That is to whom it may concern.
Yeah, well, I mean, center mass, it concerns them and the neighbors 3 rows back, but whatevs.
Creating the water balloon festival.
Absolutely.
Put a mod deuce on a crow system, you become Skynet. Like
what
you were
is the crow system? That happened after I got out. So what is this crow system? Is that the joystick one from inside where you just control it remotely?
Yeah. You sit inside the truck and it's got like a cassette of ammo and the weapons like up on like a. Have you seen like an LRAS or like a?
I have.
Yeah, it's kind of like a LRAS looking thing, but with like a slot for the weapon and like a, for lack of a better term, actuator to like charge it.
But see, they're missing the crucial part of a firefight. When you're standing in the turret and you get to cuss at the guy, like, eat lead, get some. You got to hail insults like, I boned your sister
Oh, you
last night.
can.
How about those apples?
It does
They
make
do
it
that,
much
but you
easier
gotta
to
think about it.
communicate with the TC because JRTC, when I'm just standing, like, and we didn't have like they tore out all the internal comms on our Humvees, but before by accident, before I went to JRTC, so I didn't have a headset. I'm just yelling down into the thing at the TC. I'm hoping he can hear me. He's hoping I can hear him. I usually can't. We got rolled up on by a BMP, mowed down our entire section. So I turned around because our SCO was sitting. We'd recovered our SCO, and he's trying to talk to higher, tell them what's happening. So he parks us on a hill, in the middle of the road with the sun in front of us, and I'm in the lead truck, and I'm like, well, I can't see shit in front of me, so I'm gonna look over my shoulder, and I see headlights behind me. So I'm like, ooh, that's not good. That's either a civilian or someone who does not give a shit whether or not we can see them. So I grab my trigger, take a look, like the Star Wars binoculars, and I'm like, that's not a Bradley, that's not an Abrams. So I start kicking the shit out of the driver. I'm like, hey man, hey, you need to start driving. Drive right the fuck now. Like, drive. And they're like, hey, we gotta stay
Okay,
here.
where we go? We can't stay here.
They're like, oh, hey, we need to finish this radio call. So I just stick my head down the turret. I'm like, bro, we gotta go. There's a fucking tank behind us.
Big monster, let's go.
I did get to drive some of the old T-84, whatever the Russian tanks were, because when we got there in the early war in 05, we were cleaning up the retrograde, which was from the Highway of Death from the first Gulf War. So it was all the Iraqi National Guards tanks. We were hauling them back to the rear to get fixed and given back to the new government. So we got to get in them, and some of them we had to drive to get onto the flatbeds. That was a unique system with the levers and stuff. You didn't deal with any of that, did you, when you were in?
No, we didn't have to. My exposure to Soviet vehicles was we'd like look at the switchbacks at the side of the mountain when we flew over them with helicopters. We see all the Soviet vehicles like upside down at the bottom in a lake, like all the guys that didn't make it. Some
of the older tanks had the stick laterals. I don't know what they call those, but some of the older stuff had that too. That was more common when tanks first came out, almost like a helicopter controls.
Yeah, I know from like talking to people that mess with them, the Abrams, it's like more of like a motorcycle type setup almost.
Yeah, I mean, I've never played with them other than we had to try to get the old broken ones and the get them on the flatbeds to escort them to the rear, and then take the new ones back to deliver them. Which is obviously it's the new ones that had been repaired that we were driving, not the ones that sat for like a decade. I'm not even sure those engines would turn over.
Yeah, I had to learn to drive a Bradley in basic, though I haven't touched one since. Those drive more like a cat or like a tractor or something.
Yeah. So, all right, well, we're gonna mark this time because this is where we're going to transition to talking about your Kickstarter. So with that out of the way, obviously this Kickstarter is for a comic book. It is called Reiter's War. What's the official name for it? Let me see if I can pull that up.
Armored Warrior Panzerter Reiter's War.
Yeah, the mouthful, that. So what would you call that as far as like if you're going to rate this for age appropriateness? Like what would you rate this? I
would say like PG-13. Like it's okay for your teenager. Like so the artist is like, hey, like having a cheesecake cover like helps sell. And I'm like, well, let's make it tasteful. Like the kind like World War II pinup that you would see in like a Bugs Bunny cartoon, as opposed to like actual World War II pinups where they just had like bare boobs out. So like no, there's like there's some like so the cover D is gonna like have some sexual themes, but it's gonna be tasteful. It's not gonna be like anything horribly inappropriate. The most of it is just gonna be like violence and like kind of mature themes. Okay. Because there are a big part of the Panzerter universe are these tubers that are used by the Union. They are artificial people that are essentially grown in. They're not clones. They're like mass-produced designer babies is the best way I can describe them. They're essentially grown for a purpose, and a lot of them are soldiers or like farmers. Or there's stuff that like regular Union people don't want to do. Like not all soldiers in the Union are tubers, but a lot of them are. And so there are some like moral quandaries with like how they're treated and like some more mature themes with that. But the comic shouldn't touch on that too heavily yet.
So is this in a world that you already have books in, or is this a brand new world?
Yeah, so this is an adaptation of the first Panzerter book that I wrote, The Red World War, at least the first fifth of it. The idea we had was we were going to take that first book and break it into like a 5-issue mini, see how it did, and with success we would do 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe some original stuff, maybe like in the break between like adapting book 1 into a 5-issue mini and book 2 into a 5-issue mini. Maybe we have an original 5-issue series taking place in the same universe. I have currently 3 series taking place in this universe. There's the original Panzerter series, which follows like basically National Guard guys fighting like the vanguard of this like Union force invading their country from the frontier into like basically where their homes are. Then there's the Blackwater series, which follows, it's more of like a space, more of your traditional like space fleet, space opera. Like you're still following mech pilots, but they fight from like spaceships, and they're more like fighter pilots as opposed to the ground types where they're more like tankers or infantry or fancy helicopter pilots. And the third series, which is currently ongoing, follows a bunch of Marines on islands as they deal with the Union invading them there in more like littoral type combat.
Okay. Is it going to be color? Grayscale?
No, it's going to be grayscale like this. So Rob Hunter actually drew for DC and Marvel for a while. And his strength is an inker, so doing it in black and white like really just lets him play to his strengths. It also, if I'm completely honest, cuts down on production costs because I don't have to pay a colorist.
Yeah, they get pricey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nick, you got thoughts on the comic art since that's your specialty? I'm going to go through slowly some of this.
No, I'm familiar with Rob's work. I've loved it. I still love it. I think this is great. Yeah, and it definitely plays towards his inker strengths with the embellishment of line art. And yeah, it's just beautiful. And he's got some really good workarounds. Yeah, it's fantastic art. It's like, it's really, even in the grayscale, it's eye popping. It draws your attention. It's something you want to read. And it gives it a really dark, gritty feel to it.
He's really good at drawing people like being like set on fire or like crushed in their cockpit or like dying horribly inside a mech.
I hope he talks to the counselor about that.
There's like 4 or 5 panels in here with just people like, like the Gundam, like, you see like their cockpit, like their controls just kind of come back and crush them.
Yeah, I really like this image. I don't like, I mean, I really dig this art for this armor. It definitely has very much Battletech vibes to it.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to like, in terms of like the way everything felt, kind of split the scene between Gundam and Battletech, where it felt like a little bit like elevated as opposed to Battletech, which is just pure, like as far as like that goes, like relatively hard sci-fi, and then not so crazy as Gundam, where they fly around in atmosphere like they're jets.
Yeah.
Now these are the alt covers that'll potentially come out with stretch goals. So this is one of them. I really dig the way he shows the cockpit opening up, and you can kind of see that. This is another one of them.
Yeah, so those are the Martian. That is the kind of the frontline Panzerter that the Union uses. And I made a few deliberate design choices there. The reporting name the Tharsans use for them is Tin Hats, in reference to their big disc-shaped heads. I kind of wanted to evoke like the War of the Worlds, like tripods with their look, but also kind of like the World War One helmet, where it was like that British helmet, where it was like just kind of like a flat disc.
Yeah, the Doughboy.
Yeah, like the Doughboy helmet almost. And I mean, the design's been iterated a lot since since my first draft of the novel. Originally, they had like much more of like a gas mask type looking deal, but I eventually just eliminated most of the face because I wanted them to look like less human, less friendly, like less approachable. Like you see one there on the right, like about to throw hands with the Panzerter Mark III.
Okay.
This is good work. This is the kind of thing you could potentially see framed on a wall somewhere as actual just art.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cover C. If I had to pick any of the posters to like just put up and frame on my wall and like blow up real big, it's probably this one. Either that or cover A, which is the one with our main Tharson. Yeah, cover A right there. That's our main Tharson POV character, Reiter, right there, kind of leaning out of the cockpit.
And this is cover B?
Yeah, it's cover B. That's Damian Blake. He's the Union Battalion commander. Dear viewer, don't spoil for new people here. You know what happens to this guy. They don't yet. We'll get there.
Well, hopefully it's bad because he has the haircut that he's going to keep the whole company there past 1900.
And then this is the one you said was vaguely sexual, but it's a girl.
I like that one. I want to see that cosplayed.
Yeah, originally, so the first version of this had more cleavage, and I was like, "Hey, Rob, let's make this a little more tasteful."
So I like the use of light and dark on it, though, for the metal. Like, as someone who's colorblind, I really do appreciate grayscale art and the way he's using it to like show light and dark. You see it in this one, and then you see it in this. Where is it? This picture where you see the guy like beaming in.
Oh yeah, so that is kind of like, so context of this scene, Guard Colonel Blake is kind of talking about how we have new weapons, like we're going to go kick their ass, we're going to do this awesome thing. He's kind of hyping them up before they go invade Tharsis. And so they're all saluting around the table, and that is kind of like a presentation of like the Martian. Like, look how awesome this like cool thing is. Which, I mean, I think after 6 books, I think after 13 books, this specific model, like this mech, has been shot and blown up more than any other in this series.
Okay.
Just because I think it's one of the few models that shows up in book 1. In every book, it is consistently around till the end. It's like cutting edge at the beginning of the war, but by the end of the war, it's like, all right, it's good enough. Just keep pressing these into battle. We have like hundreds of them.
So obviously the Kickstarter's for a comic adaptation of this series. What are the stretch goals, or like what is, let's talk about that. We've talked about the art. We need to go over a little bit about the universe and then talk about the actual nuts and bolts of the Kickstarter. So first off, do you want to give us a synopsis of the universe other than it's got giant stompy robots?
Yeah. So this is a bit of an alt history universe where a very destructive World War III happened. 1 second, I'm pulling up my stretch goals, so I'll have that later. Okay, sweet. So let me find StreamYard again. Yeah. So the beginning of like the universe is not the beginning of book 1. It starts in 1989, where a bunch of prominent figures in Warsaw Pact states, instead of the leadership that our timeline took over, it's more return to Soviet, like hardliners took over the Soviet Union. So a bunch of the Warsaw Pact member states had a secret meeting in Vienna, or they thought it was secret. They're going to talk about how they were going to all leave Warsaw Pact and like just be like, hey, we're not going to be part of this. We're not going to be beholden to you. Like, remove your forces from our country. The Soviets hear this, and the meeting is in Vienna. So they nuke the meeting in Vienna, nuke most like the capitals of like all the Warsaw Pact members, except East Germany. They nuke Dresden because Berlin is split. They don't want to provoke the Allies. Enough radiation and fallout. lands in West Berlin, that it does end up kicking off World War III. But you have like this whole swath of the country between whole swath of Europe between Belarus and West Germany that are essentially homeless because their countries have been very thoroughly destroyed by this war. So they live in refugee camps for a long time in America. And eventually, when space colonization opens up in the 2030s after a Fourth World War, they're one of the first people to go over. They eventually form the nation of Tharsis. Whereas the Union is like a prison colony if the prison colony decided to be communist like almost immediately and then start growing people. There's a bit more to that, but essentially all these colonies start forming on Mars. Mars terraforms. They become their own nations with their own identities. And by 2135, tensions are high. They're at each other's throats, and Mars kind of descends into its own kind of world war that extends into space.
Okay. I could dig it. So how many, you said there are 9 books out in this universe already, and then now the comic book adaptation?
So there's 6, 11, 12.
But who's counting, right?
Yeah. I had to think in like total numbers of the books in the series so far.
Okay. So that's the universe. Definitely sounds interesting. For those that, want to read these before the Kickstarter comes out, obviously the Kickstarter's live, back it, support your local, indie veteran artists. But for the actual book series, is that something that's available in audio for those that read with their ears?
Yes. So Yes. So almost everything has an audiobook. Only the newest book doesn't have an audiobook yet. I'm still working on that. But everything else is available on Audible. Is what I meant to say.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. So now let's talk about the Kickstarter itself. So what is the goal, and then like what are the stretch goals, and what are we bidding? Let's talk nuts and bolts of the Kickstarter.
All right. So the goal is $7,000. That's mainly just to make up my investment, because I invested deployment money into this. I just didn't get some return on that. So $7,000 is just the stated goal. At $10,000, we're going to add some bookmarks. Everyone who orders a book will get a bookmark, as in like 1 bookmark per book. Like if you order like all 4 covers, then you can get like a bookmark for each one. $14,000, everyone who gets the trading cards add-on will get an extra page of trading cards. $20,000, a new short story taking place in the universe that'll be exclusive to backers. $25,000, everyone who gets a physical order will get an art print, which I'll commission when we get there. $30,000, I'm going to upgrade the quality of paper we're going to use for the covers, and $35,000, I'm going to upgrade the book words. I'm sorry. At $35,000, I'm going to upgrade like the paper quality of the books over what I have planned to something a little bit more durable. At $40,000, we're going to get a new cover. $45,000, we're going to get a bonus print, and $50,000 is top secret.
Ooh. So, you just need someone who wins the lottery and then to back this thing, right?
More or less. Honestly, there's like a certain point where there'd be a certain point that like if we backed it to that level, I would be like, well, damn, I need to come up with like a stretch goal for this, because like it's like the plankton meme. Like, oh, I'm not sure. I didn't know I'd make it this far.
That's fair. All right, so that's the Kickstarters. It's going live for 30 days, correct?
Yes.
And when did it launch? Because we're going to air this on Tuesday or Wednesday after I edit the tech issues out.
That's good. It launched on March 1st.
So we got to the end of March, so March 30th. So, get it in March and you're good?
Yeah.
So when are you expecting delivery? I mean, is this a comic already done, or is it still in production? Because, obviously the story's done.
Yeah, the story's done. The only thing that needs to be finished is I need to finish getting the lettering instructions to the letterer. And then once he returns like the finished pages, I just need to go through and make sure they're not like, I'm going to have like a couple other eyes look at it and make sure there are no like spelling mistakes, like proofread, like make sure there's no like little continuity errors, or like you can see the page clearly, even with like the speech bubbles. Like it's like about, I would have to say like about 80% done.
Okay.
When I did the Kickstarter for my, I did a Kickstarter recently for the latest Panzerter series, Storm Warning. When I launched that, the book was done. I like to have, when it comes to things like these crowdfunding campaigns, I like to have like the main product done or effectively done by the time I launch the campaign to shorten the turnaround. And as you'll notice with the stretch goals,
smart.
very few of those stretch goals affect the length or require me to edit some or fix something internally with the book. Like I'm not going to add pages. If we make like an absurd amount of money, like I will look into, well, maybe we color it, maybe not. But I'm trying to avoid stuff that will like mess with the book itself, because that would cause a delay in getting it into the hands of backers, and I don't want to do that.
There's something to be said for the clean look of a black and white. It adds a little bit of grittiness that I think a war story works well for. Maybe I'm biased because I'm colorblind, because Nick's shown me some that look good with color, but I'm sure I don't appreciate the same way normal people do. But I like that it's black, that it's grayscale.
I mean, I do too. A lot of the comics I read as a kid were black and white or grayscale. Granted, there were exceptions. Like you read like the old Spider-Man or X-Men omnibus; those were in color. But like I read the Dark Horse's Godzilla run, and those were all in black and white and grayscale. And they're also drawn by Art Adams. Very, very talented.
Yep.
So are you going to be doing more in these comic book lines, assuming they go well? Is it just going to mirror the story? Or are you thinking about branching out with other plot lines that exist only in graphic form?
So yes, exactly that. This goes well, I will branch out. Partially because that allows me to space out. Like I can have like an original storyline, and then like an adaptation, and then an original storyline, and then an adaptation. And so I haven't advanced I have plans for the timeline past like this one conflict, but so far all the storylines have taken place during this conflict, and not like a few go like a little bit past it in like their epilogue. I think the main series epilogue is like the furthest it goes, and that's 5 years past the end of the conflict. I could see a situation where I use the comic medium to start like that gentle forward motion to like, all right, we're a little bit past the Red World War. We're getting into kind of this post-war era. How does Earth react to all this? Because a bunch of crazy shit's happened. How do other entities out in space react to this? Because there's nations in like the asteroid belt and the Jupiter sphere. Like there are plot lines to explore for sure, and the comic medium might be the best place to start those.
So are there aliens in this world, or is it all human versus human?
It's human versus human so far. I've thought about involving aliens at some point. I thought about this. This isn't really a spoiler for Blue Bloods, because this might get recycled later, but one of the plot lines I wanted for my Blue Blood, I thought about putting in the Blue Blood series. It's not going to be in there now because I decided to go in a different direction. Was the reason the Union invaded these islands was to excavate what they believe are the remains of ancient aliens and try to do some crazy stuff with like the tuber DNA and basically making like hybrids. And well, in the books, that's pretty consistent with what the Union does, because they don't have a lot of morality when it comes to what is appropriate to do genetic testing on.
Now, what was the inspiration for your concept of the tubers? Because the idea of clone troops has been, obviously Star Wars iconically did it with Clone Wars. Hugh Howey did it with A Long Way Home, I think was the name of the series, where that's how they colonized, is they basically like vat babies, and then they let them experience childhood in a virtual reality that they thought was real until they, dropped the body out to go do their thing. Like, what was your inspiration to decide to bring in cloning?
So with these like mass-produced designer babies, I wanted, and this might be controversial, but I was like, what are like the worst aspects of abortion and slavery, and how can I have that in one thing?
Oh, okay, that is controversial.
Because I was like, my whole like, I'm not going to get too far in the weeds, but it's like you take away the choice from people, you set them like on the certain path, and there's no humanity to it. You treat them like property, you treat them like equipment, you treat them like they're disposable. Like, I was like, okay, that can work, and I'm just kind of grossed out by the concept of like designer babies. Like, we're gonna mess with our kids' genetics and make them perfect. I'm like, that's kind of creepy.
Okay. I mean, do you have your tubers, I guess is what you're calling them? Are they having shortened lifespans, or do they have normal lifespans once they're born?
So they have normal lifespans, but they're essentially sterilized when they hit puberty. The union possesses the medical technology to reverse that, but the only tubers they're willing to do that for are ones that serve with the mobile assault guards, which are essentially like the best of the best, and like union shock troops. They're like the front line, and they're also going to be the ones absorbing the bulk of casualties in any serious engagement. So like, you live out your term in that, congratulations, we'll unsterilize you.
Yeah, but that sounds like not many of them make it.
Yeah, and
it's like
the Tharsans think that's like horrific to the point of not believing it's real.
So when are they born into an adult body, like they're vat grown, or do they have a normal childhood?
So it's cheaper to just grow them into like a baby, and then they're essentially raised in creches that are devoted to like, all right, these are all these templates are for farmers. So we're going to teach them everything about farming. The only thing relevant to them is farming, like basic math and like life skills, but only so far so that they could be like a decent farmer and interact with like the world around them and make the kind of connections that a farmer's supposed to have. Or like, this is a soldier, specifically a pilot template. We're going to teach them everything about piloting a Panzerter. Their whole life is going to revolve around that.
Okay. All right. So, was there anything that you wanted to tell us about the world or the Kickstarter that we didn't ask? Because I feel like I've got a good feel of what's going on with what you're offering story-wise, comic book-wise. Is there anything we didn't ask?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. So when you drew, my last question, when you built the culture around these robots, giant robots, did you lean into like armored culture, like with the Cav angle for you, or did you create something new?
So I started that as my base because, again, alternate history, they're universally called Panzerters because they were invented by West Germans because the Americans were looking for a weapon to end the war in Afghanistan. And there's a short story on it that is on my newsletter chain, or it was. I need to double check my newsletter chain because I might have swapped it for a different story by now. But it was basically the first Panzerters were like these big cumbersome things with like a 50 cal on one arm and like a Bushmaster or a Mark 19 on the other, like these big like excavator things. They pulled from like Cav scouts, helicopter pilots, and tankers to essentially do like a reverse Tet offensive on the Taliban in like 2008. So they just get like wiped and are effectively destroyed, and the war on terror is effectively over by like 2010. So we could focus on other things. But so it did start as like there are some like Cav and armor traditions like pertinent to that, but by the time our story starts, it has become its own thing. I do treat them as real military vehicles though.
Okay. So drive it like you stole it?
Yeah, like maintenance is a bitch. Maintenance is a whole thing. They break down. They have their own issues. sometimes like the comfort features just aren't there. My editor, she actually said like, you know, when I envision sci-fi, like there's a lot of like holograms and touch screens, and there's not a lot of that in your Panzerter books. I was like, you know how easy like it is for some Billy Bob Private to fuck that up when he's stressed and sweaty in the middle of a fight, or some touch screen gets out of alignment. He's desperately trying to eject or something, but he can't because he's sweating and he's panicking. No, knobs, switches, buttons. You can't mess that up.
Yeah, and it's the tactile sensation would ground it a lot more easily than like pointing and touching air, especially when you're operating on body, like muscle memory kind of thing. I got one of the critiques I've seen from people that are into blades against Nick's vaunted lightsaber is that because it's a laser and just a handle, it would not balance properly. And you'd end up getting people swiping off body parts on accident because it doesn't have the natural feel that a weighted blade would. Because the tactile, I imagine you get some of that when you talk about knobs and tubes versus holograms.
So I actually got Nick
JR,
covered.
I'm going to give you a class on how the lightsaber works.
Fancy lightsaber looking weapons. So there's really three, because the Martians have like these big bases that are collapsible. I mean, self-explanatory how you use a mace, you just swing it. Whereas the Tharsans, they have two. They have the Iron Blade, which is kind of like a lightsaber, but it's got like a collapsible ceramic rod that vents plasma, which is contained by an electromagnetic field. So it can parry another like blade of similar construction, but can also cut through things and burn through things pretty easily. Also makes a great entrenching tool. And then there's the Tesla blade that the Luva, the kind of base of the franchise Panzerter, the Mark, is it Mark 6 or Mark 7? I think it's the Mark 7, where it's like a big bastard sword. It's got like all these Tesla cells that essentially it's like a big heavy weighted sword that's like wrapped in lightning.
Lightning is our friend. I'm digging it. All right, and we'll save the lightsaber classes for offline, or maybe solo content. We could talk about that kind of weaponry, future weapons, maybe. I don't know. We'll make it its own thing.
I will absolutely geek out about the armaments these fucking Panzerters have, because man, sci-fi weapons are just fucking cool.
Absolutely. All right. So with that, this is the part where I remind you, dear listener, after you run and back this Kickstarter, go over to his books, buy those as well, and then leave a review. Please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platform. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books. And then once you buy the Kickstarter, leave a review there too. I don't know if it matters, but do it anyway. I don't know how Kickstarter works, people. But all right. So Tyler, how can they find you on the wild interwebs? Where are you most active? And then, as usual, all the links will be in the show notes.
Excuse me. I'm fairly active on X. I also have a pretty decent following on TikTok, thanks to my wife helping me make those. She assembles the pictures and I just type the text. So that's one less thing I have to worry about.
She's hired.
Yeah. Yeah, no, she's super good at that kind of thing. No, my wife is saintly, but also like a big Amazonian woman because she's 6'2". Yeah, our son's gonna be enormous.
So you're saying you're gonna start the next Amazonian clan, I guess.
Yeah. I'm also pretty active on X at TE Butcher Author.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I'm 6'2", my wife's 6'2". Our son's gonna be a big heathen.
Watch the fates will be like have jokes, and your son will be like 5'2".
We might have won. We've joked about like, oh, we'll have like 4 kids, 3 of them will be enormous, and then one will be like 5'2".
Not midget, but tiny. All right, so you can find us, dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree /Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree /Blasters and Blades Podcast. where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, the Twitters. We have our website. We have our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. For professional purposes only, people, save the shenanigans from Adam Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, Twitter, and the email. You can support the show over there at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that it's for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee until it re-dyes Nick's beard black instead of gray. But seriously, people, these episodes are produced, so every penny helps. We greatly appreciate it. If you use the code for that coffee brand coffee, the link is in the show notes. Code is podcast grunts. You get 10% off. We get a little bit of a kickback. It's a win-win, people. It's a actual coffee company, not a drop shipping operation. So they actually roast the beans in the continental United States. And they are working on shipping globally. So there's that as well. And with that, I would say thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. And with that, we're going to hit the end button. Thank you for coming on, Tyler. It's a lot of fun. We'll have to have you back on to talk again about nerdy things, because that's what one does with other Army guys. Maybe we could plan the Civil War and the Revolution if we had modern weapons. And with that, we're going to hit the end button.